Hey guys, welcome back to another video with the Financial Controller, Bill Hanna here. In today's video, I'm going to explain to you what this graph here means, which summarizes what goes on in an audit engagement. It's pretty funny. Stick around if you want to see what it means. And then we're going to read this post here from an audit senior, new audit senior here. I spend most of every day confused and stressed out. I work at a mid-sized firm and cover a broad range of industries, but mostly manufacturing. Accounts never seem to reconcile, analytics never seem to pass, and clients never seem to understand what we need from them. Generally, none of the work goes as planned. It's starting to make me depressed. Is this just what an audit is like? Is this all of public work? Does it ever get better? So in today's video, I'm going to focus on two things. First, I'm going to explain to you why starting out in audit and public accounting is an amazing foundation for your career as an accountant. And then the second thing we're going to do is we're going to analyze this post here and understand all the reasons why an auditor gets stressed out and depressed. And I'm going to show you ways to cope and deal with it. But first, let's take a look at this hilarious graph that I think summarizes pretty well the predicament of the senior in an engagement, in an audit engagement. So as you can see here at the beginning of the engagement, you have the top folks in the engagement, which is the partner and the senior manager. And as the problems begin, as the differences begin in an audit, which is represented here by the that's rolling downhill, it goes down and rolls down, and the senior is the person that gets submerged the most because they have the burden of performing the work. Beside the senior, there is also the staff. So the staff is all the way down here, right? But they are protected by the crest of ignorance, right? So they don't know much, they're still new, and they're protected by that crest of ignorance, while the senior is submerged in the shit. So it says that meanwhile, the associate discover more shit as they proceed with the engagement. Not sure what to do with it, they conceal it in the cave of unreported exceptions, or CUD, if you will. So they just shove these things under the carpet here in the cave of unreported exceptions. So I thought this represents pretty well what goes on where the senior has the most amount of work and problems to deal with, and that's the crux of what today's video is about, the depression and the stress that comes with dealing with all of this stuff as a senior. Now let's go back to that depressed auditor and see what he's saying. So, new audit senior here. I spend most of every day confused and stressed out. I work at a mid-sized firm and cover a broad range of industries, but mostly manufacturing. Accounts never seem to reconcile. What he's referring to here with accounts never seem to reconcile is that when an auditor begins an engagement, they start from prior year, so the audited prior year, and they are comfortable with the numbers, and now they want to roll it forward to the current year. So what they do is they take the ending balance, which they audited, the ending balance is correct from last year, and they roll it forward to this year. So there will be prior year ending balance plus activity in the current year equals the ending balance, and that's how they get comfortable with the ending balance and the trial balance. And they say analytics never seem to pass, and the clients never seem to understand what we need from them. Generally, none of the work goes as planned. It's starting to make me depressed. Is this just what an audit is like? Is this all public work? Does it ever get better? Right? So this is the post, and there's a girl here. I think it's a girl because of the icon that she's using, but she's saying this is literally the epitome of an audit. My manager has stayed in the job 20 years, and it really is about learning to laugh about the stuff and stupidity of clients. If you can do that, then you can get through it. Sometimes I understand that it can get really bad and really stressful, but just remember that no one ever died because an audit wasn't done on time. Very true, right? So no one died because an audit wasn't done on time. It's not the end of the world if stuff doesn't get done. Half the time, the reason it's not working out is because of the clients. So remember that you are one person and can only do so much with the time that you have, right? So she's kind of saying, like, chill out, right? You're only one person. You can't just really be stressed out about the whole engagement. If an audit doesn't get done, nobody's gonna die from it. So this is the first response here. Now, the next response to this post comes from someone who worked previously in public accounting, and it looks like they know what they're talking about, and they provided really good advice on how to cope with the depression and the stress that comes out of audit. So I want to share with you the practical tips and advice that they shared here. So he says, I dropped out of public accounting after my 4th year to become a controller at a client. So this is similar to what I've done myself. I worked 2 years in audit and then got out to private industry. I started out as a financial analyst, and then an accounting manager, and then a controller. But it looks like in his case, he spent 4 years in audit and then went to become a controller at a client, right? Being a senior was legitimately the most stressful my life has ever been. That being said, I think there are some stuff that you can do to not quite guarantee success, but make it a little bit more likely. Number one, be extremely clear in your request. Talk to them like they are an absolute moron. I like this guy, but be nice about it. When possible, provide examples, previously provided support, etc. So usually an audit begins with the auditor requesting from the client what we call PBC, or provided by client list. So that usually the list has trial balance, financial statements, supporting schedules to the balances on the trial balance, and all that stuff. And then the auditor will make a selection out of the transactions on these schedules and test it out and make sure that it has supporting evidence, the calculation is correct, and all that, right? So what he's saying here is that you should provide examples. If you're asking for a certain schedule, you can show a schedule from the prior year and say, here's an example, here's what I want, give me exactly like the example that I'm showing you. So this is a really good practical advice. The second one is try and specialize. Like you, I was spread pretty thin. It doesn't make a huge difference as a senior, in my opinion, but on several occasions I found myself trying to remember what guidance applied to what client. So this really makes a lot of sense, right? The original poster is saying that they worked in many industries, services, manufacturing, software, right? But as you spread yourself thin, it's true that you're learning so much about different guidances that apply to different industries, but at the same time, it's very stressful to remember which guidance applies to which client, right? So what he's saying here is to try to specialize. That will take a little bit of the stress away. Number three, take copious notes. Anytime something didn't go quite right, I just had a running OneNote tab to track it. For example, spent 8 hours trying to communicate with the client regarding a request or revenue testing and got the required support. This has two advantages. The first advantage is that it helps you or helps your manager and partner identify extra bill, right? So if you spend a lot of extra time on a certain subject, take notes on what you've done to spend the extra time and why you had to spend the extra time. And now the partner or the manager in the engagement can bill extra for that. So there's extra revenue, and that's going to work out well for you comes bonus time. Second, and most importantly, you'll have a record of this for the next year's audit, but also every single other client where this might be the same issue, right? So keeping good notes would help you with billing for the client and also helps you identify the same issue when it happens with the same client or a similar situation with a different client. Tip number 4 this person is giving us here is that, kind of going off of the above, if someone is just too absolutely dense to understand what you're asking, consider if there is something else you can ask for or do. Or lean on your manager to ask if there is another way you should be phrasing it. So consider this: if you're asking for support or a question that the client is just not understanding, and that happens repeatedly, maybe double check yourself. Maybe the way you're phrasing it or what you're asking for doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So maybe go to your manager and consult and figure out if there's a different way to do it or something else to ask for, or maybe another way to phrase what you're asking for. Okay, so this is tip number 4. Now, tip number 5 from this person here is one of my favorites, where he's saying pass the buck to the client as much as possible. What he means here is that you should push on the work to the client side rather than you trying to do all the work. So he's giving an example here. We usually do a wage analytic by reviewing cash disbursements to the payroll company and accounting for these various reconciling items. When I do that, I'm still off by 8%. Why? I don't spin my wheels trying to figure it out. Make the client figure it out, right? So you're making an analysis of payroll and you're coming up with a difference. And instead of you trying to spin your wheels and understand why the difference exists, you should push it over to the client and say, I have this difference, try to figure it out for me. So I think this is really helpful and practical advice here. Now, in summary, this controller is recapping everything and summarizing everything by saying, as far as does it get better, that's really a subjective question, man. Do you work less? No, not really. But if you intentionally try and address your problem areas, then it should at least become more manageable and a little less stressful. Public accounting will never not be fast-paced, so inherently creates a stressful environment. Clients won't always be former auditor and understand the assertions you're testing and the most ideal form of support and documentation before you even open your mouth. But you can certainly learn from past mistakes and improve the situation for yourself on the go-forward basis. And in the end, and this is the part that I love, in the end, if none of that works, leave public accounting for industry and be so mind-numbingly bored at your 130K job as a controller at 2:30 in the afternoon on a Thursday in the middle of March that you've already spent an hour on Reddit and you're considering calling it a day pretty soon. Best of luck. Edit. I did in fact call it a day after posting this. Time for a beer. I love this guy. I think we can be friends. But anyway, I think this was really good practical advice from this controller who used to be in public accounting. These 5 tips are really good to adhere to and follow. And I mentioned at the beginning of the video that I'm going to talk about the biggest reason I recommend starting out in public accounting, especially audit. For myself, I started out in audit. Why this is really good as a good foundation for you as an accountant later on. The biggest reason, in my opinion, is because of the amount of learning. Being in public accounting is almost like being in university. You're constantly learning from 3 different sources. So the first source you're learning from is your peers and your managers, right? So you're working with peers and managers that almost always are all CPAs and all experts in the matter, right? So subject matter experts that are teaching you the industry itself, right? So the peers and managers. The second source of learning is the actual classes in the public accounting firm. Usually Big Four especially will have a lot of learning classes that you go to attend and understand and learn new pronouncements, new guidance. So it's just like university. You're sitting in a classroom and learning, right? And the third and best source of learning, in my opinion, is the client himself, right? So as you go to interview the client, in my public accounting days as an auditor, I sat down with controllers, CFOs, directors, and managers of the client, and they all explained to me the accounting and the process in their business, right? And the best thing is that there was almost no stupid questions, right? Because you're trying to learn their business, you don't know much about their business, and you can ask anything, right? So that's your opportunity to learn and ask a lot of questions from all different sources. You got your peers, the managers, you got the client to learn from, you got all the classes, the formal classes that you go and attend at the public accounting firm. So all 3 different sources of teaching in public accounting will give you a really good foundation, and that's why I recommend spending between 2 and 5 years in public accounting and then transition out to private industry and progress your way either to a controller or a CFO, whichever. If you want to take the reporting route, you go through a controller. If you want to go the analysis route, you go into CFO. But public accounting is a really good place to start. So if you like today's video, give it a big thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video.